I think it's been a very promising beginning for the mothers who have come. I'm getting the impression that this is the first opportunity that the majority of them have had to share their experiences, to think about the experiences that they've had, and also to feel about the experiences that they've had. And it seems to me that the majority of the mothers in this particular group have just been left to try to find ways of managing their traumatic experiences pretty much on their own. Certainly when I was evaluating the first workshop, as well as the second one, mothers were saying how relieved they are that they can create images to have some space to think about what's happened to them and feel about that individually, and have been surprised by some things that have come up, and then are getting a lot out of sharing their experiences with one another, reassuring one another, understanding they're not alone, and supporting one another a great deal. So I feel, although we've only had 2 workshops so far, that the group has already taken some risks with one another to share experiences that they have said very plainly they have never shared with anyone else before. How do you feel about it so far?
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Yeah, it's been, I don't know what I was expecting. I don't know, but it's been good. I've enjoyed it. Yeah.
What do you enjoy about it?
Time to sort of sit and just focus on one thing and talk with people who have had similar experiences. But yeah, I think the main thing's time. It's quite nice to just have time for just me to do something which is, you know, completely about me and not about anybody else.
It would seem that there are many common themes coming through already of feeling guilty, feeling of failure, having felt very frightened during labour, very disempowered, and also a great deal of loss around the births not having been the way they had imagined.
Do you sometimes still think about your birth experience at all, or is that sort of far away now?
It's not as far away as I wish it was. I think it's still on my mind quite frequently. I don't think there's anything in particular that necessarily makes me think of it. It tends to be in the evening when I'm putting her to bed, when we're quiet and she's just in my arms and quiet. Then it tends to be then that I think about how much I wanted her, and where she came from and what I wanted around the birth and what I actually got, and how different those two things were, I guess. Yeah, springs to mind more than I would like, and more often than I expected.
So today's workshop, I thought we would have a look at childbirth myths and fantasies, linked to hopes, imaginings, expectations, beliefs, things that have influenced you, perceptions. And I just thought having some images might help you think, where did they come from? Where did they start?
Do you think there's a lot of myths around birth?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of talking about how you should feel and what you should do, and I don't always think that's very helpful, because I think everyone's individual, and I think it is seen as a rite of passage for women that isn't very helpful either, because it's sort of can then be perceived as a success or a failure depending on how it goes. And I think that's the wrong way of looking at it.
You didn't feel that you were a bit judged, maybe?
I don't feel I was personally, but I had the feeling. No, I didn't feel that I'd failed, but I certainly, having talked to other people, I think other people can feel that way because of how everyone gets excited about it, everyone talks about the dream birth and baby and dream this and dream that, and nothing to do with motherhood is angelic. You know, there's a mix, and I think it causes pressure.
But one of the myths that seems to be being highlighted in this particular group is this notion of nature being perfect, where mothers are challenging that having a natural birth means having a perfect birth, as if that's a given. In some respects, of course, birth is natural, but that doesn't mean to say that each birth is going to be easy. And I think it's that confusion. The two things seem to have become linked somehow.
I think what's coming out is this idea that your image or idea of what pregnancy and birth is a really eclectic mix of things that other people have told you or things that you've researched for yourself, and just tons and tons of ideas that you've collected about it. And then on top of that there's this sort of simplicity, which is what I'm going to do about adding a sort of pencil drawing of a pregnant woman, because you also think, yeah, but it's just giving birth, like it's a thing that people have done for thousands of years, you know, it's not that complicated. And then as it turns out, neither of those things is really the truth. So I might think about a third layer, which is my actual experience of it.
I took it quite literally as just the myth that it is natural. Because for me it really wasn't, and I believed it. I thought women have been doing it since time began, it's just going to be easy. And the same with the breastfeeding as well, because whenever I spoke to my midwife about fears that I wouldn't be able to breastfeed, she said, what you have to remember is it's natural. Women have been doing it for years. But for some women it isn't natural, and the milk doesn't come in, and they have to have, tablets to help the milk come in, and so that's what it was about. But if you look carefully, like all the vines are quite complicated, and they're messy and haphazard, which is sort of an indication of actually that is what birth can be like for some people. That's it.
It's like a pack of cards. I think it's just random whether it goes well or not. But I just wrote a list of all the things that I remember this time. But it's like black and white. So it's breast versus bottle, C-section versus home birth, stay-at-home mum versus career mum, good versus bad, medical versus natural, weak or strong, all these things. And I think there's loads of... It's almost not even like it's a myth. It's like that's the way it should be. And if you don't do that, you're failing. You're not up to scratch.
I can't pinpoint a particular myth that I felt. So I think I focus more on my own experience of pregnancy and childbirth. I do think that there is a sense of everything's natural, therefore easy, or therefore natural. So we'll be able to cope with it, which I guess in a way we do all cope with it, even if it's horrific. So there is an element, I think, of the strength of nature.
I think after my first baby, I bumped into somebody when Emily was just a few weeks old, and who I hadn't seen for a long time. And they said, "Oh, what have you had?" And I gave her a long list of my medical procedures. I'd forgotten that I'd had a baby at the end of it all.
When I was younger and I just saw a family, I thought I'd have 4 children. But really doing that 4 times now scares the life out of me, so...
be thinking of?
The general thing that seems to be the central theme is how their experiences have been very unperson-centred for them, you know, where they felt that they've been rather treated as an object, a baby delivering vehicle, if you like. And when they were feeling frightened and overwhelmed by feelings, not having anyone asking, how are you? What do you need? Are you okay? Are you scared? Is there anything we can help you with? And just some very basic compassion, just psychological being, really.
I think part of it was that I was induced, and I was induced earlier than they would do normally, and I knew all about induction. My background is medical, so I know about postpartum hemorrhage. I know about induction, and I knew about it all from a very medical sense. And all my friends who are doctors who've given birth have had horrific births. So I knew lots of horrific stories, but I think there was an element of, but it won't happen to me.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of it, if I blame the whole thing on being induced, and lack of control and lack of discussion and risks and benefits being discussed and things. Whereas I think next time, I won't let them near me with a barge pole to induce me. But no, I will get them to do growth scans, and they can do what they need to do until I'm 42 weeks, and then if needs be, then they can look at inducing me, but they're not coming anywhere near me earlier than that. And I'm going to stand up for myself a bit more, I think, because it was very much a case of, right now, things aren't progressing, you're on the bed, we're putting the drip up, and I knew what that would do, because I know about it, because I've got friends who've been through that, and I knew that was where it was all going to go wrong. But they wouldn't have that discussion with me, and I didn't put my foot down enough to say, no, I want to speak to the doctor, I want to discuss this, risks, benefits, and they just said no. They just said no, right on the bed, come on, this is what we're doing. And it did all go wrong, and it was horrific after that, but in my mind, that's why it happened. So if next time I refuse to let them anywhere near me, I genuinely think I will go into labour naturally, and that it can be how I want it to be. I don't think I'll be in control necessarily, but I can't see any reason why, if I go into labour naturally, why it can't go as naturally as possible.
Yeah, I did a lot of reading, and I realised that a lot of the things that medics use, no disrespect, but they can be like 30 years old, or they can be, like you said, about 0.01%, and yet it's told to you like there's a higher risk, and it's just said there's a higher risk, and then you look into it and it's so marginal that you can make a decision based on that, like you did, and like I did about not being induced. And
again, but risk is a very personal thing, because for somebody, 0.01 is 1 in 100, and for some people that still might be too high. For somebody, for it to be not high risk, it might need to be 1 in 10,000. So I think you're completely right. I think it's about when they say it's a high risk, saying, well, what is that risk? And sadly, obstetrics is one of the highest areas of litigation, and I think there is an element of doctors wanting to protect their own backs. Particularly in today's society, because it is a case of, well, if it goes wrong, then, I'm going to sue them, which in some cases is right, but in some cases isn't necessarily, because it may be that you didn't interpret the stats for your own sense of risk, if that makes any sense.
The thing with birth is, even with all the stats, it's individual. Nobody actually knows what the outcome is going to be. And I just think that you could do all the research in the world, but if your pregnancy ends up going wrong and you lose your baby or something, you would wish you hadn't have taken that risk. It's a pretty fine line.
I did loads of research into risk because I was 17 days overdue and I wouldn't be induced.
Okay.
Because I wanted my baby to come naturally, and I believed that that's how baby should come. But then I was filled with meconium, like grade 3, which I think's the worst kind, and they then had to sort of rush him out, so had all the induction drugs really quickly, vamped them up, and then he still wasn't coming, and I didn't progress like at all. Got to 2.5 centimetres after 24 hours of contracting consistently, and then had a C-section. So I just feel like it's like I didn't know how to do it. You know,
not a lot you can do when you, I mean, there's like certain situations like what's it called, meconium.
It's when babies
pooed, yeah. I mean, you know, if I'd had that, I would have done the same thing. You know, there's certain times where, you know, the risk is high, so you kind of go, right, I've got to be induced.
That and that of having to accept that you're not in control of the situation.
Yeah.
And I think that that's actually relevant to this situation. It's relevant to so many parts of our lives that there's a certain element of, well, I'm not in control of it because it's not me, even though it's taking place inside of you. It's not just you, and I think
it's funny though, isn't it, this sense that it's going wrong, because in many respects it went right, didn't it? You're healthy, the baby was healthy, and in medical terms that's a good outcome.
Yeah.
You know, so the fact that we're all sat here talking about, you know, how we feel about it, that's sort of not really considered within the medical profession, because actually the outcome was great. You know, it was a difficult circumstance and they had a good outcome.
How are you feeling about this morning?
Yeah, really positive. After the discussion as well, I feel positive about, I think, having another child, which has been a fear that's been in the back of my mind since the difficult delivery with Dylan.
You're angry?
A little bit, yeah. A little bit. Yeah, I am for the first part. I am angry because I think they should have believed me. What my waters are broke, yeah. And it's sort of like reflective anger, because at the time you're just sort of going with it, and it's only afterwards you think, I wish I'd done that, I wish I'd said that, I wish I'd stuck up for myself.
Mine was sort of about letting go and thinking about how a lot of the time I end up with spiralling thoughts and spiralling feelings from the birth. I guess partly that things spiralled out of control, spiralled out of my control. And then afterwards, my thoughts and feelings just felt absolutely all over the place in this sort of, I guess it looks a bit like a tornado. But then, particularly through coming here, there have been points along where it's felt like letting go, and that things have been more positive and freer, and that's kind of where the colour comes into it.
This week we're going to focus on the theme of celebration and affirmation, thinking about the journey that you've undertaken, what you've achieved, how far you've got, maybe other things you might like to achieve. It's a group art-making venture around a large mandala to give you a proper ending as a group.
I think for me, my main feeling was loss, that I wasn't awake when Eli was born, and James wasn't there when Eli was born, so I had a real loss of that, you know, one born every minute moment when the baby comes and goes, oh, cries and has a kiss, and I was unconscious. And then when I came round, I was being sick, so it wasn't a very glamorous sort of start, and I felt a real loss of that, sort of a real, oh, I've been cheated of my big moment that I was going to have this big. But actually, other than that, I didn't have any feelings. I just sort of got on with it, which I just think is so me. But I'm now myself more, rather than, I think I've always put on a bit of an image of how I am. I went away with a big group of people recently who I would usually be a certain way with. And actually, I was so much more, I don't really care if they think this or that. I'm just going to be me. And it was, I think, a complete reflection of what I've done here.
I think for me it was anger. I was angry about the birth, I was angry about the way I was treated. I was angry about the fact that midwives on the ward had let me down, the community midwives had let me down, but I also felt that I'd let myself down, that I'd let my baby girl down, and that I was failing and angry because of that, and that I'd failed because I hadn't been able to breastfeed, and angry at the fact that I'd got the right to be able to do that, but it was because the midwives had let me down. There was just so much anger, and actually getting that out and the artwork was just really good. And I think that's kind of where the peace and the freeing comes from, because anger ties you up in knots. And making peace with the fact that, yeah, that was how I felt, not how I feel.
Because, you know, my youngest is 3.5, got very used to just sort of not thinking about a lot of things, and just very busy life and just getting through it, and not really wanting to explore why I felt about things, but then things would come out in other ways, you know, and I'd get upset about something that probably, you know, I didn't need to be that upset about. So I think it's made me feel more open with you guys, but more open with myself, and prepared to be open with who I am.
I feel the same as you. I think I was guarded, and then I became more open, and you told us about your family, and you said all you need is love. And I think emotional support and well-being for your child is paramount. And the reason I did the hands is because hands are a powerful thing. You use your hands every day. Your hands can heal you. You look after your children with your hands. I wanted it to be like all our hands, to show that we have become quite unified as a group.
This type of therapy has just made me realise that sometimes you've got to go there, like you've got to get that out, because that's really where the root of everything is. And I feel like if I had got pregnant again, I would have spent the whole time being really scared, and I wouldn't have wanted that. But I would have been, you know, in that position of still telling myself in my head, like, stop it, it's fine, and it's all right, and you know it's going to be okay. Whereas now I actually deeply feel like it will be okay. Or even if it's not okay, like, you will get through it and you will deal with it. I feel something, like, quite significant inside about this group and what it's done for me, and how nice it's been to have been gifted with, like, your stories, especially when people have said things that they might not have said much to other people, and I just think it's been really special.